Today we're going to talk about diagramming relative clauses. A relative clause can be introduced by a relative pronoun or by a relative adverb. In either case, the whole clause functions as an adjective, modifying one of the nouns in the sentence. We'll start with talking about sentences introduced by relative pronouns. When a relative clause is introduced by a relative pronoun, it must meet the following three requirements. First, it will be a clause, so it will have to have a subject, noun, and a predicate, verb. Second, it will start with a relative pronoun, who, whom, whose, that, or which. Lastly, it will function as an adjective, modifying a noun and answering one of the questions which, what kind, or how many. Let's take this sentence. The old dog that wagged its tail so hard was the stray who ran away. Now, when you have a longer sentence like this, sometimes the challenge is to figure out what's this sentence really talking about. Is the important thing the fact that the dog wagged its tail or that it ran away? No, actually, it's just identifying the dog. The old dog was the stray. So our first phrase begins, the old dog, and finishes up, was the stray. And that's our main clause. Now we have two relative clauses. Our first one is that wagged its tail so hard, a relative clause that's introduced by a relative pronoun, that, and it has a subject and a verb. That is the subject, and wagged is the verb. Our second relative clause is introduced with the relative pronoun who, and it's who ran away. The first relative clause modifies the old dog, tells us about the dog. The second relative clause is modifying the stray, which is a predicate nominative. So let's go ahead and diagram it. Our main verb is the be verb was, which will be a linking verb. It's past tense of to be. The subject is dog. Now, before we go on, let's find the verbs in our relative clauses. Our first relative clause, that wagged its tail so hard, the verb is wagged. Who or what wagged? That wagged. So that is our subject in the first relative clause. In our second relative clause, the verb is ran. An intransitive verb because there is no direct object. And the subject was who. Now we have a couple more nouns to deal with. In our main clause, we have a subject complement, in this case a predicate nominative, stray. The old dog was the stray. The predicate nominative is a noun that restates what the subject was. You could actually reverse them. You could say the stray was the old dog, one way of determining that you have a predicate nominative. Now we have a direct object in our first relative clause, which is tail. Wagged what? Wagged tail. There is no object or subject complement in the second clause, but we do have an adverb, away, which tells us where. We have two other adverbs. We have hard, telling us to what extent. How did he wag his tail? He wagged his tail hard. And how hard? Another adverb modifying an adverb. So hard. And we have two adjectives. We have old, which is telling us a little bit more about the dog. And we have its, a possessive pronoun. Most of the time, a possessive pronoun will be acting as an adjective. So let's go ahead and get started diagramming this. We have our baseline and our bisecting line. And we know in our main clause, which is what we're diagramming first, we have a subject complement, which is a predicate nominative. So we draw a slanted line showing that the predicate nominative is referring back to the subject. We have an article modifier for both dog and for stray. And we have an adjective modifying our subject dog. Our verb in our main clauses was the linking verb, because it's linking the subject to its subject complement or predicate nominative, stray. Our article modifier, the, first word in the sentence, so we capitalize it. We have an adjective, old, the old dog, and the article modifier, the stray. Now let's go ahead and diagram our relative clauses. Our first relative clause begins with the relative pronoun that, which becomes the subject of the relative clause. And we know we're going to have a direct object, so we draw another perpendicular line that does not bisect the baseline. Our subject in our first relative clause is the pronoun that, the relative pronoun, sometimes called a demonstrative pronoun. The verb is wagged, which is a transitive verb because we have a direct object. Wagged what? Wagged tail. And tail is being modified by the possessive pronoun its. And we have two adverbs modifying wagged, telling us to what extent. The tail was wagged how? It was wagged hard. How hard? So hard. Okay, let's go ahead and do our second relative clause. Who ran away? Modifying the stray. Which stray? The stray who ran away. Our subject is who. Our verb is ran, an intransitive verb because it does not have a direct object, whereas wagged was a transitive verb because it did have a direct object. Ran where? Ran away. We tie our relative clauses to the noun that they're modifying by drawing a dotted line from the noun to the relative pronoun. I like to start the dotted line out slanted, just like any other adjective, and then it changes direction if necessary to go find that relative pronoun. In this case, that. And in the second case, we can pretty much just go straight, I think. Dotted line from stray down to who. Who is modifying stray. In fact, the whole phrase, who ran away, is modifying stray, just as that wagged tail that wagged its tail so hard is modifying the dog. And we're finished.